please the débat. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand up as the deputy critic for citizenship, immigration, and multiculturalism on behalf of the official opposition and speak to Bill C-24, an act to amend the Citizenship Act and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by just making a few introductory comments and observations about citizenship. I think there's a lot of things we debate in this House, and we can have varied opinions about, and it's a matter of policy and it's a matter of philosophy, but there are certain issues that I think are foundational. They go to the very fabric of who we are as a country. I think our democratic system, our electoral system is one of them, and we saw a very vigorous debate over the Conservative government's attempt to change the rules about our democratic elections in this House, and how they were forced to back down from that when Canadians saw that the Conservatives trying to use politics to bend the rules of the system to benefit themselves. And I think we're seeing a little bit of the same thing with citizenship. Citizenship, I think, is something that Canadians, when they think of it, it evokes a feeling of pride. And I think there's a number of things that Canadians want to see, some values that they want to see surround the concept of citizenship. And I think some of those concepts are things like equality. I think Canadians believe fundamentally in the equality of all Canadians. It's something that is, I think, a benefit of citizenship, and it's something that once you become a citizen, whether it's by being born here or whether it's by being naturalized here, you aspire to and you receive an equality that ought not to be taken away from you. I think people want to see integrity in our citizenship process. I think they want to see fairness. Canadians, I think, are known around the world, and I think in our self-image, we quite rightfully like to think of ourselves as being a people who believe in the fundamental concepts of fairness and due process. And I think it's something that attracts people to this country. When I think of why people immigrate to Canada, I think some of the things that they're attracted to are the concepts of democracy and equality and fairness. I think that Canadians also want due process. We believe fundamentally in the rule of law, and I hear that phrase used in this place a lot, rule of law. It's tossed around a lot. But I'm not sure that we have a lot of discussion about what that actually means. And what rule of law means is that decisions that affect people's rights are not taken precipitously, they're not taken capriciously, they're done by independent people in accordance with rules that are independent, objective, and impartial. They don't want politics injected. And I think that's another reason that a lot of people like to come to Canada, because a lot of states around the world are marked by corruption, where if you want to go get your utilities or your water hooked up or your lights hooked up, you have to know someone or you've got to pay some money to a government official. And that is the most egregious example of the mixing of politics with rule of law. And I think that leads to the separation of politics and the judicial, quasi-judicial process. Now, I've heard successive ministers of immigration, conservative ministers of immigration, rise in this House repeatedly and say that it is inappropriate for them to rule on or decide individual cases. In fact, they won't even talk about them in this House. They talk about having arm's-length, independent, professional civil servants make the rulings on individual cases that deal with immigration or citizenship. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I think that this bill contains some things that I think are worthy of support, but I think it offends a fair number of those concepts that I just raised. In fact, about 8 months ago, I had a conversation with a member from Wellington, Halton Hills, where he decried the use of what he called dog whistle politics. And dog whistle politics are where we raise a political issue to send a message to people that's not really what we're saying, but it's the message it conveys. And I fear, and I hope not, but I fear that this bill has underneath it some dog whistle politics where messages are being sent to the Canadian public that sow fear and division and distrust. When we start introducing concepts that introduce two-tier citizenship and where we start being invited to judge who's a real citizen, who's not a citizen, who has bona fides and who doesn't, who can be a Canadian citizen forever and who can lose it. These are fundamental questions, I think, that involve the fabric of our country. Now, Mr. Speaker, this bill does a lot of things, and like I said, there's going to be some things I think that I'm going to speak positively about and some things that I think are problematic. On February 6, 2014, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration tabled this bill, and it includes sweeping changes to Canada's citizenship laws. And the Minister stated that this represents the first comprehensive reforms to the Citizenship Act since 1977, and he claims that it would, quote, protect the value of Canadian citizenship for those who have it, while creating a faster and more efficient process for those applying to get it, end quote. Now, the first thing is, it was news to me that we haven't had an evaluation of Canadian citizenship, because the people in my riding, the people of Vancouver Kingsway, they do now and always have valued Canadian citizenship. I mean, this is a solution in search of a problem. I've never heard a Canadian in this country who has said that they don't value Canadian citizenship. And in terms of a faster and more efficient process for applying to get it, I, with respect, see very little, if anything, in this bill that will speed up the process of the citizenship, which, by the way, has been a problem under this government and the previous Liberal government as well, where wait lists in this country across the board in the immigration system are unacceptably long, and they're getting longer. Now, what Bill C-24 does is it does a number of things. It puts more power in the hands of the minister, including the authority to grant or revoke citizenship. It provides no real solution to reducing the growing backlog and citizenship application processing delays. It eliminates the use of time spent in Canada as a non-permanent resident to count towards the residency requirements before you can apply for citizenship. It includes a, quote, intent to reside, end quote, in Canada provision, where an official in government can make a determination of someone's intention to reside in Canada and strip them of their citizenship if they believe that that intent wasn't there. It prohibits the granting of citizenship to persons who have been charged outside Canada with an offence that, if committed in Canada, would constitute an indictable offence. In other words, we can strip Canadians of their citizenship if they commit an act abroad that's an indictable offence, if they have dual citizenship. It increases residency requirements from 3 out of 4 years to 4 out of 6 years, and it clarifies the requirements of physical residence in Canada prior to citizenship. It includes stiffer penalties for fraud. It extends citizenship to lost Canadians. It expedites citizenship for permanent residents serving in the Canadian Forces. It implements stricter rules for fraudulent immigration consultants, and it requires applicants aged 14 to 64 years, previously it was 18 to 54 years, to pass a test demonstrating an adequate knowledge of French or English. And I might point out, not in this bill, but concomitant with this bill, the Conservative government has tripled the application fees for citizenship. Now, Mr. Speaker, everyone agrees that Canadian citizenship is something of enormous value. What I don't think anybody wants to see is an approach that plays politics with this issue. And I think that's something that we've seen all too frequently from this government. With respect to the bill, it's high time that the issue of the lost Canadians is addressed. This has been a very unfair situation that has gone on for far too long, and I'm pleased to see this addressed in this bill. Other parts of this bill are, of course, increasingly and very seriously concerning. For example, the question of revoking citizenship in various scenarios has raised significant legal concerns, and we are always concerned about and opposed to the concentration of more power in the hands of a minister of the Crown who is inherently a political figure. We were hoping that the minister would commit to working with us to work together to bring real improvements to our citizenship laws, but again, the government has opted to go with a bill that is, in many people's views, likely unconstitutional. And the amendments that the official opposition brought to committee was, again, par for the course of this government. Every one of them was rejected out of hand. Now, since March of 2008, more than 25 major changes have been made to immigration methods, rules, legislation, and regulations by this government. More and more changes have been made since the Conservatives became a majority government. These have included a moratorium on parental and grandparental sponsorships, reducing family reunification, punishing vulnerable refugees, and increasing the number of temporary foreign workers to meet the requirements of the business sector in this country. The extensive changes to the Canadian immigration system have not made that system more effective or fair. Now, what I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, as an MP with a riding that is fundamentally made up of new Canadians, is that what we should be doing is making citizenship more valuable, and we should be making it more streamlined and faster for those honest, hardworking people who seek it. This bill has been rightly described as a bill that makes citizenship harder to get and easier to lose. Now, people come to this country so that they can get a passport, so that they can vote, so they can participate fully in democratic society. This bill doesn't do that. And I just want to say a few parting remarks before I have to sit down, Mr. Speaker, that when we give the minister power to make decisions on a balance of probabilities that someone has obtained citizenship in a way that the minister doesn't like, and we don't have a court process to check that. That is worrisome, and it has no place in the country with the rule of law.